In May 2016, beneath the cold lights of a Los Angeles courthouse, Amber Heard stood alone. A star whose beauty once glowed across red carpets, now shadowed by whispers of chaos and betrayal. Just months before, she was the radiant queen of Aquaman, the rising voice of Hollywood's new generation. But behind the flawless smile hid sleepless nights, panic attacks, and a war no camera could capture. Her love story, once celebrated, had turned into a public autopsy of pain, each headline cutting deeper than the last. Friends vanished. Truth blurred. And Hollywood, always hungry for blood, chose its side before the verdict was even read. What really happened to Amber Heard? Was she the villain? Or another soul consumed by the fame she chased? This is the untold truth of Amber Heard. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries. Amber Laura Heard was born in Austin, Texas. A place where the land feels endless, but expectations are small. Her father, David, trained horses and hunted for sport. Her mother, Paige, was a quiet, church-going woman who kept her pain tucked beneath polite smiles. To the outside world, the Heards were a modest Southern family. But inside those walls, tension hung heavy. Amber later described her childhood as strict, shaped by a man who demanded toughness and control. Her father wanted a son, not a fragile dreamer. So Amber learned early, affection had a price. Obedience, silence, resilience. At 16, her world cracked. Her best friend was killed in a car crash. A loss that would dissolve her faith and her sense of belonging. She stopped believing in the God her mother prayed to, dropped out of a Catholic school, and left home for Los Angeles with nothing but headshots and conviction. "I've always been on my own," she would later say. A confession wrapped in pride, but also in loneliness. Los Angeles greeted her with neon promises and silent rejection. Casting directors smiled, then forgot her name. She sold cars, waited tables, and sent photos back home that made it look like she was winning. But the truth was brutal. She was starving for validation. From the industry, from her family, from the mirror. Each role she auditioned for blurred into another woman's dream. When she finally landed small TV parts, the O sees happiness. Hidden palms. She was already molding herself into what Hollywood demanded: alluring, controlled, desirable. The girl who once rode horses with her father had become a woman trapped in an image she didn't own. She spoke softly in interviews, but inside she was still the teenager who'd lost her best friend and never really healed. By her early 20s, the first cracks appeared. She told friends she struggled with panic, with the noise in her head. Her emotional temperature could shift in seconds. Laughter into anger, charm into silence. She wanted love, but didn't trust it. She wanted fame, but feared what it demanded. Her relationships, short, intense, combustible, mirrored her internal storm. Then came the Rum Diary, the film that would change her life and curse it at the same time. On set in Puerto Rico, she met Johnny Depp, the man she grew up watching on screen. He was older, magnetic, damaged. Everything she had been warned about. Yet for Amber, he felt familiar, a reflection of her father's unpredictability, wrapped in charisma. He called her kid, she called him old man, and between takes they shared cigarettes, stories, and secrets. What began as a flirtation became an obsession. To Depp, she was wild, brilliant, and intoxicating. To Amber, he was the first person who seemed to see her. Not as a role, not as a mask. But behind that connection was something darker. Both carried their own ghosts, and both mistook them for love. Amber's friends would later recall her need to be perfect, to never lose control. Yet control was the very thing slipping through her hands. The girl from Texas who once vowed to escape her father's shadow had found herself in another man's orbit, spinning faster than she could stop. She had made it. Magazine covers, Hollywood parties, $1 million smile. But inside, the old wounds were awake again. The loss, the rejection, the constant fight to be believed, they were all still there, hiding beneath couture gowns and flawless lighting. This was the unspoken truth of her rise. Every achievement carried an echo of pain. Every red carpet was a test of endurance. The world saw the shimmer, never the scars. Amber Heard had survived the silence of Texas, the loneliness of Hollywood, and the ghosts of her past. But she had yet to face the most dangerous storm, the one she would help create. Amber Heard's ascent through Hollywood was not the kind of slow, predictable climb others made. It was sudden, glittering, and edged with danger, like glass catching the light before it shatters. When The Rum Diary was released in 2011, her chemistry with Johnny Depp was undeniable. The press called them the most beautiful chaos Hollywood had ever produced. Yet beneath every headline about glamour and love was a silence she couldn't escape. The fear that the world didn't love her, only the version of her reflected through someone else's fame. After years of chasing auditions, Amber was finally seen. But she soon realized visibility was its own kind of prison. She became the fascination of tabloids, the envy of gossip blogs, and the face of a relationship that blurred the line between passion and performance. When she appeared beside Depp on red carpets, she glowed under the flashbulbs. But the glow came with a cost. She learned how to smile on command, how to say nothing when her name was mispronounced, how to keep her posture flawless even when her hands shook. Roles began to multiply. Drive Angry, Machete Kills, The Danish Girl. She became a symbol of modern Hollywood femininity. Dangerous, seductive, unapproachable. But the irony was cruel. The more she succeeded, the less control she had over her own story. Studio executives labeled her difficult if she resisted, ambitious if she pushed too hard. Every interview became a negotiation between truth and survival. Amber wanted respect as an actress, but the industry wanted spectacle. The relationship that had catapulted her to stardom soon became the cage she couldn't leave. Behind the public displays of affection were whispers of jealousy, late-night fights, and a growing sense of paranoia. Friends noticed her withdrawing, eyes constantly scanning the room, phone glued to her hand. The woman who once declared independence from her father's control now found herself answering to another man's moods, another man's temper. Still, she tried to hold the illusion together. They married in 2015 on a private island, an image of perfection sold to the world like a fairy tale. But even the photos told a lie. Those close to her recalled bruises hidden beneath makeup, arguments muted behind hotel doors, and tears quickly replaced by red lipstick before the cameras rolled. Hollywood, however, saw none of that. They saw a new Mrs. Depp, elegant, enigmatic, a trophy for the tabloids to worship. The girl from Austin had become an archetype, the beauty who conquered the system by playing its rules. Yet to keep that illusion alive, Amber had to make sacrifices she never anticipated. She began turning down smaller roles, focusing on blockbuster projects like Aquaman. The pressure was relentless. Perfection demanded, vulnerability forbidden. In her interviews, she spoke about feminism, equality, and courage, words that carried conviction but hid exhaustion. The industry wanted her activism, not her pain. She became a spokesperson for strength, while quietly unraveling behind the scenes. Her nights were sleepless. Panic attacks left her trembling before interviews. She would later tell her psychologist that she woke with nightmares. Echoes of shouting, breaking glass, and footsteps approaching. These weren't movie sounds. They were memories, replaying without consent. The irony was poetic and cruel. She was becoming the kind of woman she had promised herself never to be. One who needed permission to breathe. But unlike many before her, Amber refused to surrender quietly. When she filed for divorce in 2016 and obtained a restraining order, the world turned its gaze on her again. But this time, it wasn't applause that followed. It was disbelief. Hollywood does not forgive women who speak before the script says they can. Overnight, she transformed from rising star to controversy incarnate. Her name was dragged across talk shows, Reddit threads, and late-night monologues. Memes replaced empathy. Her voice, once celebrated for defiance, was now drowned by the noise of those who chose not to believe. Yet even in the chaos, she clung to her cause. She donated her $7 million divorce settlement, promising to give it to the ACLU and a children's hospital. A gesture meant to close one chapter and start another. But years later, when those donations were publicly questioned during the defamation trial, that same gesture became ammunition. What was once portrayed as generosity now read as deception. This was the paradox of Amber Heard's rise. The more she tried to prove her integrity, the deeper she fell into the machinery of judgment. Every act of self-protection was twisted into self-promotion. Every statement became a headline weaponized against her. For a while, she retreated from the spotlight, living quietly, studying her own reflection in the fragments of her former life. She knew now that fame had never been a mirror. It was a magnifying glass that burned everything beneath it. Her sacrifices were not measured in money or missed roles, but in the erosion of something deeper. Trust, privacy, peace. Hollywood had given her the stage she always dreamed of, and then forced her to perform her pain in front of the world. And yet, through the exhaustion and humiliation, she endured, convinced that someday the truth would find its way through the smoke. But the truth, like fame, has its own appetite. And the price of being seen was only beginning to reveal itself. By the time Amber and Johnny's marriage began to fracture, the world was already watching. But what unfolded inside their penthouse was far more surreal than any film either had made. It was not love anymore. It was performance art in pain, a cycle of devotion, destruction, and denial. Their love story had become its own tragic screenplay, written in bruises, voicemails, and shattered glass. Amber once said that living with him was like walking through a minefield with no map. At first, there were quiet apologies, flowers after storms, nights that promised change. Then came accusations about jealousy, lies, infidelity. She began recording arguments on her phone, trying to capture reality before it could be rewritten. "You're never going to be perfect for me," he told her once, his voice low, the kind that cuts without raising itself. "And I'll never be enough for you." We Are South. Those tapes would later become infamous. Relics of a private war turned public. In one, Amber's voice trembles between rage and regret. "I'm sorry. I hit you. I didn't punch you. I was hitting you." She was defensive, desperate to control the narrative even as it slipped away. In another, her laughter breaks into sobs, like a person watching her own collapse in real time. By 2016, their arguments were no longer confined to walls. Police were called. Photos of her face. Red, swollen, marked. Appeared on tabloids within hours. She filed for a restraining order, and with it came a media storm unlike anything modern Hollywood had seen. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion, a theory, a side. The internet divided itself between Team Amber and Team Johnny, long before a single verdict was spoken. The trial that followed years later. Streamed, dissected, memified, wasn't about truth anymore. It was theater. Amber's tears were slowed down, analyzed frame by strangers who had never met her. Every gesture was proof or performance, depending on who was watching. Fame had become surveillance, suffering, entertainment. What the world didn't see were the smaller, quieter moments. The sleepless nights in hotel rooms, the therapy sessions where she trembled, recounting memories she couldn't categorize as real or imagined. Her therapist described hypervigilance, a constant state of alertness, as if waiting for the next explosion. Friends said she stopped eating, that her face grew thin, her eyes hollow. She was living in survival mode, even when cameras weren't around. There were no heroes left in this story. Only two people who once loved each other, now trapped in an emotional demolition neither could escape. He drank to forget. She spoke to remember. And in that divide, Hollywood found its new addiction, outrage. Her marriage, meant to be a sanctuary, had turned into a battlefield fought on two fronts. One physical, one digital. When the defamation trial began in 2022, it wasn't just Amber on the stand, it was every woman who had ever been called a liar, and every man who'd ever felt falsely accused. The courtroom became an arena for society's deepest wounds. Depp's team painted her as a manipulative actress. Her team described him as an abusive partner. Experts debated her mental state. One psychologist labeled her with borderline and histrionic personality disorders. A public branding that would follow her like a scarlet letter. Another testified she suffered from PTSD caused by years of abuse. Both spoke as if they were dissecting a specimen, not a human being. And in the middle of it all, Amber sat there, expressionless, trying to survive the spectacle of her own life. Each headline became a new injury. Amber caught in a lie. Amber's tears under the microscope. Amber Heard's career in free fall. It was as if the world needed her to be either saint or monster. Anything but human. But the most haunting detail wasn't in court. It was in the silence that followed. When the verdict came. A mixed but devastating blow. She didn't cry. She simply stared ahead, lips trembling, the weight of 7 years collapsing into that one still image. The cameras captured everything, but the truth behind her eyes remained untold. She later said she had lost faith. Not just in justice, but in storytelling itself. "No matter what I say," she told a journalist quietly, "it will never be enough." That line, weary, defeated, almost whispered, revealed the core of her tragedy. She wasn't fighting for sympathy anymore. She was fighting to exist beyond the caricature the world had drawn. In the aftermath, she vanished. Sold her California home, moved to Spain with her daughter, and refused to perform remorse or rage for anyone. To some, it looked like exile. To others, survival. But for Amber, it was simply a return to silence. The same silence she'd once escaped in Texas, now reclaimed on her own terms. Her love story had become her downfall. What began as fascination ended as evidence. The man who once called her my everything had turned into her adversary. The woman who once glowed beside him was now haunted by her own reflection. In Hollywood, tragedy often ends with redemption. But for Amber Heard, redemption was no longer the goal. After all the cameras, the lawyers, the millions of strangers shouting her name, what she wanted most was something the world had never given her: peace. And peace, for Amber Heard, would mean disappearing. Silence has a strange sound after years of noise. When Amber Heard left America for Spain, she didn't announce it. There were no press releases, no grand gestures. Only a quiet relocation to a small coastal town where no one cared about Hollywood verdicts. Locals saw her walking with her daughter, reading at cafes, smiling faintly when recognized. It was the calm after a decade of storms, but not the kind of calm that heals. It was the numb stillness that follows an emotional car crash, when you don't yet know which parts of yourself survived. Her downfall was written not by a court, but by a culture that needed a villain. The 2022 trial became a social media blood sport, watched by over 480 million people worldwide, with live streams dissected frame by frame. TikTok videos mocking her tears reached billions of views. Every gesture became a meme, every sentence a weapon. Fame had devoured its own creation. For Amber, the aftermath wasn't cinematic. It was clinical. According to court testimony, her psychologist, Dr. Dawn Hughes, confirmed a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, describing symptoms of panic, insomnia, and flashbacks. She reported vivid nightmares, trembling hands, and a constant fear of losing control. Those symptoms, the doctor said, were consistent with long-term emotional trauma. But the world didn't want a medical report. It wanted a verdict that confirmed its bias. She had lost her career almost overnight. After the defamation ruling, her role in Aquaman 2 was drastically reduced. A film that once promised superstardom became a symbol of public rejection. Her talent agency quietly cut ties. Studio contracts evaporated. In less than a year, she had gone from red carpet regular to industry exile. Her name, once luminous, now carried a digital scarlet letter. Yet behind the silence, something darker lingered. Not addiction, but exhaustion. Court records hinted that she was under psychiatric care, monitored for recurring anxiety and depression. A friend told People magazine that she wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating, and couldn't stop reliving the testimony. Her weight dropped visibly during the trial, and she was often seen clutching her phone like a lifeline. Fame had been her addiction once. Now, it was the poison she was learning to live without. Her story forced the world to confront a question it didn't want to ask. When two broken people destroy each other, who does the world blame? The internet chose sides, but trauma doesn't. Forensic psychologists later reflected that both Depp and Heard exhibited signs of mutual abuse, an uncomfortable truth that didn't fit the Hollywood narrative of villain and victim. It was easier to laugh at her than to look at ourselves. At a society that turns human breakdowns into primetime entertainment. Even the financial aftermath was cruelly ironic. Amber owed millions in damages she couldn't pay. Depp's lawyers offered to waive part of the sum if she dropped her appeal. An agreement she eventually accepted. The statement she released afterward wasn't defiant, but weary. I have made no admission. I simply cannot afford another year of litigation. It was the first time her voice sounded truly unguarded. Not the fighter, not the actress, just a woman admitting defeat. But the trial was only half the story. The real tragedy lay in what followed. The erasure of her identity. Producers stopped calling. Journalists stopped asking about her activism. Her reputation as an ambassador for human rights, once celebrated by the United Nations Human Rights Council, was quietly scrubbed from websites. When she appeared at a Spanish film festival in 2023, applause was cautious, uncertain. People didn't know whether to cheer or to whisper. Yet even in exile, Amber refused to completely vanish. She began working on In the Fire, a small independent film shot in Italy. Her first project since the verdict. It wasn't a comeback. It was a resurrection attempt, fragile and defiant. The movie's plot, about a woman confronting darkness in a haunted village, mirrored her life almost too perfectly. When asked in an interview if she still believed in Hollywood, she smiled and said, "I believe in survival." Abre. That single sentence carried the weight of every scar she had earned. Because the truth about Amber Heard isn't hidden in legal documents or viral videos. It lives in the contradictions she embodies. The advocate who was silenced. The victim accused of manipulation. The actress punished for speaking at the wrong time. The woman who chased love and found war. Doctors called her trauma clinical. The world called it karma. But beyond the noise, there's another possibility. That Amber Heard's collapse isn't just about one woman's mistakes, but about an entire system that consumes pain for profit. Hollywood has always thrived on tragedy. It sells beauty, worships youth, and discards the women who dare to age, speak, or fight back. Amber became a modern parable for that machine. The cost of being visible in an industry that punishes imperfection. And when the spotlight finally turned away, she found herself alone, facing a quieter but deeper kind of reckoning. Who am I without the noise? Her mother's death in 2020 had already fractured her emotionally. Her daughter's birth in 2021 became a lifeline. In Spain, neighbors say she spends most mornings walking with the little girl, rarely looking at her phone. Sometimes, healing doesn't look like redemption. It looks like escape. If there's any redemption arc left in her story, it lies not in the courtroom or on screen, but in her refusal to completely disappear. She has begun writing again. Essays, journals, fragments of her own voice, unfiltered by scripts. Close friends say she's working on a memoir, not to prove innocence, but to reclaim authorship over her own life. "They wrote my story for me," she told one confidant, "and they got it all wrong." A father and Mungin, the Amber Heard the world thinks it knows. The villain, the liar, the manipulator, is a projection built by a culture addicted to certainty. But the real woman is something messier, broken, proud, defiant, still standing. Maybe that's the real untold truth. That the greatest self-destruction of all wasn't the marriage or the trial. It was her belief that fame could fill the void left by silence. And when that illusion collapsed, she was forced to meet herself for the first time. Amber Heard didn't die, but a version of her did. The one who believed Hollywood could love her back. What remains is someone quieter, scarred, but strangely freer. In the end, her story isn't about justice or scandal. It's about what happens when a woman becomes both the myth and the warning. Because in Hollywood, the lights never really go out. They just find another tragedy to illuminate. And somewhere on the coast of Spain, a woman once called the most hated in America finally watches the sunset without anyone watching her back. This is the tragic truth of Amber Heard. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries.